This is Gerardo Del Real along with my co-host, the ready to farm and enjoy the spring out in his beautiful home and estate, Mr. Nick Hodge. This is episode 16 of Bizarro World. It truly is a bizarro world, Nick. Your home city, Baltimore City Hall, the mayor getting raided by the FBI. I want to talk about that. I want to talk about the Hive. Let's call it, I don't want to call it a debacle. Let's call it the drama, the Hive Drama. Shares pulled back, 20, 30%. Deutsche Bank, I want to talk about them. They're hilarious. A lot going on. Tesla, Robo-Taxis, measles, Game of Thrones. I need your weekly update. But first things first, how are you, Nick?
I'm doing well, as I typically am, like you said. Excited about the sunshine, excited to get outside. I'm doing good. How are you? How's the family?
I'm well. It's 78 degrees outside. It's sunny. My youngest is back in Little League. We're helping coach that. That's always fun. It's baseball season. My Cubs are in second place. We're looking good after a rough start. Things are good. Can't complain.
Javy Baez is running out of the baseline. What's going on? I saw some pictures yesterday. Did you catch that play?
Caught it live. The rule states that once you establish the base path, you can deviate, and as long as you come back to within 3 feet of your original base path, you are legal. So kudos to Mr. Baez. He's got the highest IQ of maybe any baseball player I've ever seen. And if he doesn't have the highest IQ, he damn sure has the best instincts I've ever seen. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous what he's able to do on the base paths, with the bat, with the glove. Just a monster of a baseball player. So a real pleasure to watch. Cub fan or not, I would encourage anybody to just Google some Javy Baez highlights. He tags like nobody I've ever seen. He's got a cannon for an arm. He's got a big bat, and he runs the base paths and has some of the best slides I've ever seen. So, yeah, truly an exciting player. It's fun to watch.
And he makes it look easy.
And he makes it look easy, and he does it with a smile. What else can you ask for, Major League Baseball?
That's what it's for.
I like it. Let's talk markets. Gold, we talked last week. It was, light trading volumes. We had the shortened trading week. It seems like people are gearing up for the spring leading into the summertime. It's held in there well. I'm actually encouraged. It's at 1277 as we speak. I think as long as we don't break 1274 to the downside, we may actually see, a turnaround in May followed by what typically is a strong June through September seasonally, right?
I think we need to watch the broader markets, not as enthused as you. I think, yes, it's hanging in there, but it hasn't certainly been strong over the past couple of weeks. And quite frankly, there's no reason for it to be. I think we need to look at broader markets. We have the S&P back to nearly all-time highs at late 2900s, approaching a big round number in 3000. And I think all eyes are on that. I think with U.S. equities at all-time highs and showing a bit of strength, certainly in the first 4 months of this year, that people aren't too much worried about the hedge and the insurance that gold provides because stocks are going up. And so I think we're at another inflection point, sort of like we were in October and November of last year, where the market is searching for direction. So watch S&P 3000, see if it holds that. It's sort of like S&P 3000 for me is the new $1,300 gold. And, if it doesn't hold 3,000 and we get some sort of correction or pullback from a bull market that's getting quite long in the tooth now, then maybe we'll see some hedges and some fear come back into the market. But for the time being, stocks are going up. The VIX is all the way down, and gold, she's just hanging in there.
Well, I am more optimistic, I think, than you are for a couple of reasons. I think despite the fact that Bitcoin is flirting with 5,600, briefly eclipsed that here recently. I think it's at 5,540 as we speak. Despite that, despite the fact that we have some big M&A in the cannabis space with majors, and despite the fact that the broader indices continue to set record highs, it's, we haven't got the pullback that I would have anticipated. And especially when you consider that the dollar is broken through that 98 level. And I'm telling you, it's headed back to triple digits. It's headed back to 100. I've said repeatedly for the past 3 years, gold's rally won't be real until it rises along with the broader U.S. indices and it rises along with the dollar. And it's not rising with those yet, but it's not breaking down either. So that'll be really interesting over the next couple of months. Something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, I think we're sitting in a good position. Everybody should be relatively happy. We're at that phase in the market where there's a lot of optimism. You should have made money over the past 10 years from the ascent of broad-based equities, and you've had certainly plenty of time to put money into speculations that should perform well when we get a reversing of cycles. So, enjoy spring. Bide your time. It's coming.
Absolutely. I was on LinkedIn the other day uploading an interview for Resource Stock Digest, and somebody posted something that said, all the money is made by being early in the cycle, right? And I joked that I've been 3 years early now into this cycle, so I can't wait to see the fortune that's made this go around. So yeah, let's talk the junior space. It's definitely a very apathetic market. Is that a word? Apathetic? You're the English major, Nick.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, no one cares.
Fuck yeah. All right, I got one. So it's a very apathetic market. I think, a clear example. I can't think of a better one right now. Mill Rock Resources, project generator with projects throughout Alaska, project in New Mexico, and a couple of others. But the bottom line is, they were able to secure $1 million strategic investment from EMX. EMX coming off a $67 million transaction. They have lots of cash to invest. This was their first strategic investment. And that $1 million is going towards staking a 200 square mile land package next to Northern Star Resources Pogo Mine. And so they got this district scale. It's a play for a potential future camp. And, they did it at 100% premium to Mill Rock's share price. They came in and gave Mill Rock $1 million at 14 cents a share. Well, you would have thought after the announcement that people would have rushed out to bid up the shares, right? Where are shares right now? 7.5 cents Canadian, half a penny move. I think it touched 8 cents earlier today. But again, that database that worked up this land package, $15 million has been spent on it. Market cap, $5 million. Bonkers. Crazy market.
Yeah, absolutely crazy. They're next door to a good project, as you said, that was recently in the news in the past year or two for M&A. And yeah, typically when a bigger company invests money in a company at a premium, the shares tend to go, if not all the way to that premium price, at least some of the way there. But in this case, no, that doesn't happen. Like you said, investors are certainly apathetic. It's tough to get them off their butts. They're just not interested. And so that's the disconnect you face in the resource space right now. You have companies who know the rocks, who know the land package, who know the upside opportunity, willing to pay 14 cents, and the market's only willing to pay 7 cents. So the arbitrage, the money is made on that arbitrage, and the people who know about those disconnects, and that's some of what we do. So keen to pick up on, and good on Mill Rock for getting it done. It's certainly been tough times.
I like the ages, the arbitrages. Fan of the ages.
I like the Taj.
Like
the Taj
the
Mahal.
Taj.
You like that one?
Like the Taj. Just like that one. That's the one I had in mind, Nick. Huge fan. Huge fan. Let's talk, let's keep it to the broader markets. I read something that made me laugh because I thought it was something like from The Onion. I thought it was something that was satirical, right? And so I thought it was satire. Deutsche Bank came out and said that they were in talks with Commerzbank to merge, and one of the conditions that the German bank Commerzbank I think wanted to impose, I think they told him, well, you have all these shitty assets, which again goes back to what I've been saying and I'll continue to say until it happens, so we can say it was well documented. You have all these shitty assets in Europe. You have all these bad performing loans. Your portfolio is trash. So we will merge with you if you take all those bad assets and create a bad bank. Write them all off, and then we'll go ahead and do a merger of equals, right? And so obviously that did not work, right? The talks have fallen through. That's not happening for the time being. I've said Deutsche Bank is not sustainable. I've said this for years. They managed to somehow stay afloat. That balance sheet is absolute trash. But the fact that a bank is seriously considering taking all their bad assets and turning them into a new bank, I mean, is there logic in that to you? Like, would you invest in that new bad bank if you were a large fund manager?
Well, maybe because I'd probably get some sort of payola or commission for pushing it on my clients, and that's how the shit works, right? Yeah. So, I mean, not surprising here. I didn't know about this story, but I view banks as criminals. They were the ones who brought us 2008, who got bailed out, who have been caught red-handed, doing all kinds of crazy stuff, not just with derivatives and crazy financial instruments, but laundering money for terrorists and rigging commodity markets, of which Deutsche Bank itself has been involved in. And they continue to operate with impunity, and they continue to just get to pay a fine or a fraction of their ill-gotten gains to the government and continue to get to operate in those ways. And so it's unfortunate and it's bizarre, and that's where we are in the world.
It is bizarre. I'll tell you another thing that's bizarre, and I saw you mention it on Twitter earlier, Facebook. They're looking at, I think potentially, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought it was anywhere between $3 to $5 billion in fines for being an asshole of a company. And shares
and it went
surged.
up.
No, they didn't just go up; they surged, right?
Yeah. Yeah, Facebook was up 6% today. That's a lot for a big company like Facebook. And like you just said, because we're expecting them to be handed a fine for their infractions on privacy and other shitty things that they do, following you around the internet, in addition to all kind of other stuff that you shouldn't be on Facebook or invest in their stock. But we've talked about that another time, and maybe we'll talk about it again in the future. But the point here is that they're about to be levied a huge fine, and no one knows yet what that fine is going to be. And over the past couple of months, it's been rumored that the fine was going to be in the billions with a B. And that's a big deal because I think it's the FTC. I hope I got that right. The biggest fine they've ever issued is like 33 million or something like that with an M. So this is going to be a giant, giant fine. And the reason we now know approximately, still not how much it's going to be, is because Facebook had earnings this week. And on the earnings call, they said that they set aside $3 billion to pay this fine. And Wall Street took that as very, very good news because they make over $10 billion a quarter. And that's exactly what I mean by these big companies. Just it's like a toll for them, right? It's just the cost of doing business when they break international law and they treat consumers not like people, et cetera. And so it's a much wider discussion, but I think you're going to see some of this antitrust issues come to the fore in the next couple of years, probably in the next presidential cycle, because it's one of the things that rarely seems to get talked about when we talk about taxing the rich and the wealth gap in the country. And then you look at the list of companies who didn't pay any tax at all and get to operate with impunity, not just on the tax front, but on the legal front, as we see here with Facebook. I think people are growing quite tired of that. And if you want to take it one step further, you're seeing influential people sound the alarms, like Dalio, who we talked about a couple weeks ago, go on 60 Minutes and say, hey, something's a bit wrong with capitalism here, even though I'm a billionaire. And so basically they're trying to get ahead of the pitchforks, right? They'd rather try to implement some changes. And I know I'm sort of just meandering here, but it's sort of an internal discussion I've been having in my head. Is like, we got to put some fixes in place here, or else the people are going to get even more pissed than they are. And we'd rather fix it with some policy or start implementing some new ideas now, and rather than wait until people are in the streets French style. So Yeah, no, all very interesting things, all part of the current state of affairs, all part of the Bizarro world for sure.
I tell you what else is interesting. Hive. We talked about Hydro 66 last week, for the past couple of weeks actually, and we talked and kind of joked a little flippantly, but it was half joke, half not joke, that when you and I went and visited the facilities in Sweden, Hive's facility happened to be right across from Hydro 66's facility, and look like a dilapidated warehouse. I mean, that's what it looked like. Not to say that all their facilities are like that. Not to say that there wasn't good work going on inside. I don't know. We didn't tour them. But man, it sure looked lonely and gloomy and dark, especially in contrast to what we saw from Hydro. So it was interesting to me that we get this new news release from Hive that basically says that Genesis, which owns approximately 26%, I believe, of Hive shares, they wanted a meeting to get rid of basically the Hive brass. And Hive has said that this came in response to them demanding 50 million US dollars from Genesis because Genesis hadn't fulfilled their commitments in regards to mining and electricity costs, energy costs, and what that was supposed to be. So without having too many details on the actual energy cost and what the fight was there, Genesis sounds like was ready to get rid of Frank Holmes and some of the bigwigs at Hive, and basically wanted to take it over. And so the stock has not responded well. The issue was with the facility in Sweden that we said didn't look like much was happening in, and now it looks like a mess that's going to take a little bit to clear up. Any thoughts there?
I have thoughts. I was gonna make a joke, but you want to have a serious conversation, so I have a serious
No. Make the
conversation
joke first. Make the joke first.
I was just gonna say apathetic and flippant. You're really just expressing the vocabulary today. I feel like I need to brush up on my Spanish and come with some Spanish words to keep up with your vocabulary here.
Tienes que practicar tu español, Nicolás.
Sí, yo necesito estudiar mucho. No?
Taki.
That's funny. So what happened with Hive? They got, I don't know if you read what I write, but I follow Hydro 66 as we've talked about. And the way I've distilled this is that you can either be a crypto landlord or you can be a crypto tenant. And what I mean by that is you can own your building and you can own your mining machines or your computers, or you cannot. You can lease the building space and the machines to mine from other people and pay them for power, etc. I view it as more beneficial to be a crypto landlord, which Genesis is and which Hydro 66 is to some extent, but which Hive is not. Hive is a crypto tenant. They pay rent. And so it sounds like, in very rudimentary terms, you've got a landlord-tenant dispute going on. The landlord raised the rent. The tenant wasn't happy, and so now whatever happened has happened. There was a board fight. Genesis tried to get, as you said, the CEO kicked out, and some of their own peeps put on the board. All amounts to, because they changed the rates for energy. It sounds like we didn't get too many details, but the point is that Hive is not mining. If you read all the way down to the last sentence, which you should always read a press release backwards because all the good stuff is down at the bottom, the last sentence said that, oh, by the way, we're not doing any mining at all. Our machines are shut down and we're looking for somewhere else to mine. So stock went down 38%. It has actually been up in the past couple of months because crypto prices have been going up, but down 38% from where it was the day before the news came out. And for me, really just confirmation of the thesis of why we invested in Hydro, right? Because it owns the assets, it owns the building, it owns the machines, and it also can be a landlord, right? It leases to other people who want to do what Hive does and lease space to mine cryptos. And so that presents a very interesting question. I wonder who will become Hive's new landlord.
Well, I will read what to me, because I'm biased. I'm a Hydro 66 shareholder. I just added to my position. I will continue to, as long as you people sell me your shares at 26, 27 cents Canadian. But the most important sentence in that news release to me was Hive is actively seeking alternative service providers to Genesis to provide transparency and superior value to Hive and its shareholders, and in particular, emphasis me, with respect to Hive's equipment and operations in Sweden, which have become dormant. There's no one else there that has the scale or the expertise or the input cost that Hydro has. So the company won't say it. I'll say it. Do your due diligence, people. Make your own decisions. But I'm buying Hydro. Simple as that.
Yeah, it's pretty simple.
I like it. Let's talk. You mentioned Facebook, and I had a thought, but I wanted to keep it to the markets. Let's pivot a little now. Who's a better salesman? Is it Elon Musk, or is it Mark from Facebook? What do you think?
Well, I think it's Elon Musk because well, his company is done a lot more with a lot less and has been adopted a lot less, right? Facebook's got, I don't even know what the number of users is, but it certainly begins with a B, right? And Elon Musk hasn't quite gotten there with the sales of Tesla cars. They just lost 700 million in the last quarter and have a share price, I think, still over $200. So, not to mention the Boring Company and the rockets and all that. So it's definitely Elon Musk for me. I mean, I don't know how you feel on it, but I think Elon Musk is a better salesman for sure.
No, I agree. And this latest event and earnings release, which wasn't a positive one for Tesla, but they had an event basically talking about the technology and really the first mover advantage that they have over anybody in the autonomous vehicle space. And, he said something, and I've learned that with Elon, if he says it's going to happen, and this goes back to his PayPal days, it's going to take longer. And he said this, actually, he joked, but it's probably going to happen. And he said something that really stood out to me. He said, if you fast forward a year, or maybe a year and 3 months, depending on regulators, we'll have over 1 million robo-taxis on the road. And so for people not familiar with Tesla, what he's saying is, if you own a Tesla vehicle, you will be able, while you're at work, to turn on your Tesla app, slide a little button that says your vehicle is available, and your vehicle will serve as an Uber or a Lyft while you're at work, and it'll make money for you. It'll drive itself. It'll pick people up. It'll get them to their destination, come back and pick you up when you're ready to get off of work, and you would have made some money. He's saying there's going to be 1 million of these things within the next year to year and 3 months. I don't know about you, but that is absolutely mind-blowing to me. Let's say it takes 3 years. That's fascinating to me. I mean, I'm sitting here thinking, okay, if I buy 5 Tesla cars, I just lease them out, I'll have my own fleet. They'll pay for themselves. Thoughts?
Well, I got thoughts. I'm not as, again, on this topic. I think it's going to take longer. We've talked about like delivery drones and stuff like that on this podcast before that we were told was coming. And I think a couple of weeks ago we talked about a FedEx or Amazon delivery robot or something, and I expressed my reservations about that because I told you there's no way. Well, they're getting down my road through my gate or up to my house, and I realize I might be the exception, but I don't think the technology is there yet, and it really hasn't happened. And so, what do I want to say about this? I want to talk about Uber and Lyft because Lyft just IPO'd, and I think Uber has filed some paperwork. And there's a document that the Financial Times, I believe it was, put out that it was done, I think, in satire and in jest, but it was like a distillation of Uber's filing documents. And basically it was saying, in not so many words, we're fucked unless the government lets us do this. Basically, we don't make money as a taxi company. The government doesn't let us in there to operate as a taxi company. We kind of scrape by screwing over all our drivers. And oh yeah, our real business doesn't work. So now we're trying other businesses like food delivery and stuff, but that's not really working out either. And so unless the government lets us changes the regulations and lets us become a taxi company, we're kind of fucked. And so, and that's about Uber and Lyft. And I would say the same thing. That's sort of immediately what came to mind. It's all great, but it's really contingent upon laws being changed and upon these new things being adopted. And if it doesn't, then they can't.
Yeah, there were other two things, and those are all great points. There were two other points within his presentation, and I listened to maybe 2 hours of it while I had some downtime in the evening time. The first is that for Uber and Lyft, the typical cost per mile is, or the typical ride sharing costs are about $2 to $3 a mile for Uber and Lyft. Mr. Musk says that a Tesla will have a cost per mile of 18 cents. That is not, I mean, let's say he's wrong. Let's say he's wrong by a factor of, 2. Let's say it's 36 cents. That's still 7 to 10 times less, even if it's twice as expensive as he thinks it is. So, hey, you know what? People can say what they say about Elon, but I'm excited to see how this plays out. The second point that I wanted to make is he said that they were so confident that the regulators would approve of this and that the insurance companies wouldn't understand just how safe the vehicles are, that Tesla would be launching its own insurance product that they believe is more accurate and competitive for Tesla owners, and obviously more affordable. And that speaks to the point of Tesla's data that they have, right? He noted that since the latest update, they have over 400 or 500,000 automatic lane changes where the vehicle, you put the destination, you get on the highway, and it just goes and it's switching lanes all on its own. So they have over 500,000 of these interactions without a single accident while it's on autopilot. So fascinating times. I mean, whatever side of the fence you're on as to Elon Musk and the viability of his companies and the way he chooses to do business and how he's late on everything, the conversation about these types of technologies to me is exciting. If you're somebody that feels threatened potentially by your Uber driver, how much safer is it now that you know that there won't be one?
I want to talk about a couple of things. Do you see there was an Uber driver that got fired this week because he wouldn't take a woman to Planned Parenthood?
Yep.
Those are some of the questions that we're grappling with in this new sharing economy, right? Does he have to take her to Planned Parenthood? Does she have to find another Uber or Lyft or pay a real taxi or find her way there? All very interesting stuff that
That a
will
Tesla
likely be.
Robo-Taxi solves.
Well, I'm going to ask you about that in a second. Yeah, all very interesting stuff that will likely be litigated and that we have to establish some sort of precedence for. Like the other day, I saw for the first time emojis are being entered as evidence in a murder trial, and so. Right? I mean, you laughed, right? But
I was incredulous. Let me use another cool word I like. I was incredulous.
If I send you a stabby emoji, like a knife emoji, right? And then you end up dead. Is that a threat? Is the emoji like admissible evidence? And we're learning now that it has to be because people are communicating differently and typing differently and using emojis, tiny little images, to convey exactly what they're meant to do, to convey emotions and phrases and things like that. And so evolving language, these are all things I'm infatuated with, right? The future and how things are changing. So this is what I wanted to ask you, and I don't think we've talked about it yet on this podcast, but stop me if we have. And that's the programming of these cars. So here's the scenario, right? You're in your Tesla. You're about to run over a 2-year-old kid who's in the middle of the street. Your car can run him over. It's driverless, right? The car is in charge. It can run the kid over and kill him, or it can swerve and kill you and let the kid live, or any combination of a billion scenarios. It could be a 98-year-old woman in the street, whatever, a 90-year-old woman pushing a 2-year-old kid, whatever it is. Um, where do you sit on how should the car be programmed? Who makes that decision? Uh, where does the responsibility for those decisions lie, and what should the decision be?
Well, the way the car is programmed now is if I jump in a Tesla and jump on the highway and I enter a destination 20 miles away, it'll navigate on full autopilot to my destination all the way up until the point where I get into residential streets. If there is something that comes across the road, a person, an animal, an object, and the car doesn't pick it up, and keep in mind there's 8 active cameras and 12 sonar sensors, right? If that doesn't pick it up, I would always have the discretion to take the car back. So you're never in a position currently to where the car is in full control with you not having the option of taking it back. Now, to your question as to, well, if it's a robo-taxi and there is no one in the car driving the car, I think you got to look at the forest and not the trees. I think there's still going to be accidents. I think there's still going to be scenarios like there is today with human error that force us to ask, how do we proceed? But the technology thus far, as far as Tesla goes, if you look at the data, it's a far safer alternative to humans driving. And so me not being a programmer, me not being a coder, I can only go by the data that we have thus far as Tesla and how the car behaves in autopilot and the accidents that have happened or the lack of. And so far, whatever they're doing programming wise has proven to be safer than when you compare humans driving the same amount of miles and distances.
I get 100% that it's safer. I'm not arguing that. I just want to know who is ultimately responsible for those decisions. I mean, the car has to be programmed in some capacity, kill the 2-year-old or kill the people in the car, right? I mean, that's a decision that at some point the car is going to have to make for itself, just like a human decides to hit the thing in front of it or decides to swerve the wheel, right? And so
Sure.
it's just interesting to me because I don't know what the answer is. And some things that I've read say that the answer is different depending upon geography and culture. And I'll just give you the one example. It's
Hmm.
sort of the example I gave you. In some cultures, older people are more respected. I'm thinking of like Asian cultures, for example, like in Japan. And so they would save the old person. If there was an old person in the road, they would save the old person. But if it was a kid in the road, they would hit the kid, right? I mean, that's just
Right.
like their cultural sensitivities. But in the US, we're aghast at that, right? It's like, oh, you totally save a kid and hit the 90-year-old, right?
Sure.
Because the 90-year-old has had a chance to live their life and the 2-year-old has everything ahead of them still. And so it's just very interesting to me.
Yeah, and just for the record, I'm hitting the 9-year-old. I respect my elders, and our culture is very much appreciative of the elders in the village per se, right? But yeah, the 9-year-old's got to go. I'm sorry.
It's tough, right?
Yep. Real life stuff. Again, it's why I'm so fascinated by it. It's why Elon says that in a couple of years they'll be making Teslas without steering wheels or pedals. Crazy stuff.
Well, uh, yeah, it's crazy.
You know what else is crazy? Switching gears a little bit from the technology and that conversation and the moral dilemmas that technology presents, which I think, it's going to be a continuing dialogue. I talked about your home city, Baltimore. City Hall was raided. The feds came in and, yeah, they're looking for the mayor. They're saying the mayor may be on the run now. What the fuck is going on?
Well, there's a whole lot going on in Baltimore, and there has been for 30 or 40 years, even predating the famous television show on HBO, The Wire, which
Mm.
was largely grounded in reality. Myriad problems. An exodus of a tax-paying population from the city that left the population down below, I think, 5 or 600,000, and 30 or 32,000 abandoned and boarded up homes. Um, uh, Turnover in the police force over the past 10 or 15 years, where they've had a number of police chiefs who either got into trouble on their own or couldn't get the job done or couldn't overcome the animosity that had evolved and emerged between the community and the police, which ultimately came to a head a couple of years ago with the Freddie Gray case when um, that young man was killed in the back of a paddy wagon while in police custody when they weren't following protocols that they should have been following to ensure his safety while he was shackled. And then the city rioted. Gosh, what else? We've had a mayor that was had to leave office because she was taking bribes in the form of fur coats and gift cards from developers, and this was two mayors ago.
Can't make this
Um,
up.
and,
Gift cards.
and and the current mayor was hustling self-published kids books, and hospitals and other organizations were buying them, which was essentially a payola scheme. She was selling hundreds of $1,000s of these books to organizations, um, which she had to make decisions for or against as her then position as a city council member, and now position as mayor, which I have to assume is what led up to the FBI raiding her offices today. And so an absolute motherfucking shit show would summarize it up nicely. Is what it is. Look, you got roving gangs of teenagers going unpoliced downtown, either because I don't know why they don't have a good home structure or they have nothing else to do, riding presumably stolen dirt bikes up and down the street. Um, uh, what else? You have the famous squeegee boys who are at many red lights downstairs, downtown, who will approach your car at red lights and try to Windex your windshield and demand money from you, and have in recent months and years also been committing crimes, stealing from people through windows, etc. As I said, complete distrust of the police department. There was a unit of the police department called the Gun Task Force that was doing all sorts of crazy stuff, not the least of which was carrying blacked out BB guns in their glove compartments to plant on people, and also pulling people over and robbing them of their possessions, or demanding or taking their license and following them back to their home address and taking possessions from their house, running up tens of thousands of dollars in payroll expenses, in overtime that they never ever worked. And some of these guys in the gun task force were held accountable. But in short, the city's a mess. It's a shell of its former self, and people are leaving, including myself, because of some of the things that I just talked about. There was a good lengthy write up in the New York Times a couple of weeks ago about sort of some of the history I just laid out, and even more in depth, going through all the mayors and police chiefs, and we'll be sure to put up a link to that. But a sad state of affairs for the city, because it's a nice place. I mean, there's good people there. The Inner Harbor is beautiful. Camden Yards is beautiful, but
Gorgeous.
everyone who works downtown doesn't live in the city. Like I said, they just got that eroding tax base. Not a lot of people want to live in the city. It's increasingly dangerous. It's per capita, violent crime wise, the most dangerous city in the country. And so that's it. And the politicians don't help, because, as you see, they're more interested in enriching themselves, unfortunately, than they are in helping the city. And so it's a vicious cycle.
We've talked about that both you and I feel we've talked about the fourth turning, and we feel, I think, definitely I feel that we are at an inflection point society wise, where institutions, and this goes from social to economic, institutions will literally have to be burnt down and built from the ground up. Is there any institution, government institution in Baltimore that you've seen function in the past decade that you say, wow, they've done a great job?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I mean, not off the top of my head.
One.
The county, the I mean, the county government is okay, but in Baltimore City, it's really rough. I mean, from Public Works to the state's attorney's office to the juvenile programs. I mean, it's in rough shape, man. And so, yeah, there's going to be a turnover. You mentioned the fourth turning, and that's basically, older generations giving way or being power taken away from them by the younger generations as the younger generations ascend and take positions of power and start instituting their ideas. And we've seen some of that on the national stage with AOC and some younger politicians that are now coming into office and getting elected into office. And you're only going to see that, expand over the coming years, because if you view me as the oldest millennial born in 1983, I'm 35, and so the youngest millennial, you got to subtract 20 years, is only just now, 15, 18 years old, and so they'll be getting elected over the coming years, and so very much a generational shift. Some of these things you're seeing, and I wrote a little thing about this week for Outsider Club. You're seeing on both sides flashes of extremism, whether it's the extreme conservative marches and groups we've seen in like the Charlottesville stuff last year, or it's the Antifa stuff on the left with things we see in Portland. I view that all as symptoms of this turning and the nation's different populations and generations grappling with this change and trying to make their voices heard. And I think that the youngest part of the millennial generation is still very young and doesn't have a lot of world experience yet. And so it's still naive in some respects and is still going through that idealistic phase you go through in your early 20s when you still think you can fix the world and you think you know all the answers before the world makes you a bit more jaded. And so I expect those, and this is this is philosophical worldview stuff, Gerardo. I don't know if any of this is really true or going to happen. This is just sort of how I view things. But that generation, that millennial generation, is going to mature and be able to better articulate their ideas and frankly just have better ideas than socialism, which I think we all know isn't the answer. But I expect them to make change for the better and sort of fix some of those problems with capitalism that we talked about 25 minutes ago with Facebook and stuff.
I am excited to see the change happen. I'm encouraged by the fact that these young millennials will have a lot more time to figure this out because they'll all be in Tesla Robo-Taxis, being driven around. They won't have to worry about being burdened by driving to and from work and rush hour traffic and not being productive. So that should be fun, right?
That's it, and they're all about the work-life balance. So they're going to try to get it all figured out. And it's just very interesting that Joe Biden is now throwing his hat in the ring, and that sort of frames the whole thing up, right? Do you want the 70, 80-year-old white guy, or do we want the 35-year-old gay guy from Illinois that was also in the military and is sort of I won't say the embodiment, but certainly more representative of the younger generations than someone like Biden. It's a very stark difference.
Yeah, I just want good ideas. I want good governance, fair governance. I don't care if it's from an old white guy or a young gay guy or a Mexican guy or a black guy. I just want some good ideas, and I want some responsible governance, and I want civil dialogue so that we can learn to talk about the differences and we can agree to disagree, but without, all of the hate that tends to enter the least evolved of us, right?
Well, you got the largest presidential field of any election ever, so maybe you'll get some good ideas.
There's a couple in there. There's a couple in there. I'm curious to see how it plays out, but should be fun. Feel good stories. Let's talk feel good stories. I got one that made my heart smile. Um, Made me smile a lot. I'm actually still smiling. The feds finally charged a CEO in the first criminal case over opioids. So the Rochester Drug Cooperative CEO, its former CEO, Lawrence Dowd III, surrendered to federal agents late Tuesday. He's 75 years old. He was charged with one count of conspiracy to distribute controlled substances and one count of conspiracy to defraud the United States. He faces a minimum of 10 years if convicted. I hope, let me rephrase that. I wish him reciprocity. I like that word too, Nick. I wish him reciprocity. I hope the universe gives to him everything he's put into the universe. But that made me smile. It to me signals a pivot from the feds in the right direction. They've been so hesitant to act. They've been so, for whatever reason, behind the curtain. They refused, and we know the reason, right? The money that goes into elections and money being free speech and all of that. But it made me smile. It made me feel good to see this guy charged. I hope he gets everything he deserves.
100%. There's several states that are investigating or going after pharmaceutical companies now. And some of the details that have emerged in the past couple of weeks were even more shocking than some of the shocking details we already knew about. Things like these pharmaceutical companies tipping off pharmacies and doctors' offices when they were going to be raided and shifting paperwork so it appeared that they weren't writing as many prescriptions as they were, or helping a doctor get a pharmacy installed right in his office to push more pills. I mean, the shit's crazy. That's the dark underbelly of capitalism. You really have to be. We were talking about this in my house this week. I mean, you got to be a on a generate profits from doing that kind of damage to your fellow man. And so, yeah, man, reciprocity, comeuppance, all that.
I love it. I love it. Nick, can I get my, well, let me ask you this. Do you have any feel good stories? You always have at least a couple. And then I want my
We
Game of
got
Thrones weekly update.
we got a malaria vaccine, which is a very good thing because,
Mm.
well, malaria sucks, and mostly young kids get it, and mostly poor kids in third world countries. And I frankly, I was surprised we didn't have a malaria vaccine, but we don't. So the first one is now approved, is beginning to be administered this week. There are some questions, namely in that it's only about 35% effective, but that's still better than nothing. And so it cost over $700 million to develop. It's finally being out there. They're starting in Malawi, I think, with kids under 2, and then they're going to go to Ghana and Kenya. So good stuff on the malaria vaccine.
I'll add to that by saying that Bill and Melinda Gates and their foundation have been so proactive about funding and supporting malaria related cures and so we talked about the dark side of capitalism. I think it's good to highlight a little bit of the positive side because there is a lot of positive to like. So yeah, that was awesome. I was gonna talk measles, but I won't because that's a feel good story and measles is not. What I will say is if you are lucky enough to be able to get this vaccine, you motherfuckers should do it if you have kids.
No doubt.
I'll leave that there. Game of Thrones. I still don't watch. How many episodes left, Nick? 4 left?
I think that's right. They're all going to be longer. I complained last week that the first week was only 55 minutes. The second episode was still only about that long, but the rest of the episodes are all about 80 minutes or longer. So basically, feature length episodes. A lot of people are going to die. If you know anything about Game of Thrones, you at least have heard the phrase "winter is coming," right?
Winter is coming. Yes.
Winter is motherfucking here. Winter is the White Walkers who are coming to kill all the humans, and they arrived outside the humans' castle at the end of last episode. Um, it was sort of another lackluster episode in that they're setting the scene for this big battle. We're battling basically for humanity. We're either going to lose to what is basically death, the underworld, or we're not. We're gonna overcome and persevere. And so the battle is going to ensue either over the next episode or next couple of episodes. From the things I read and have heard, it was one of the most expensive, longest, most intense fight scenes to film in cinematic history. So we should be in for a treat in the coming weeks. Many of our beloved characters are going to perish, and this is what we've been waiting for.
Oh man, you're hitting a lot of keywords I like: exciting and expensive and best fighting scene ever. I might have to watch this episode, Nick. If I watch, will I know what's happening a little bit?
I mean, I sort of just set the scene. It's
I
the
like it.
humans versus the non-humans, and that's it.
I like it. I like it. I'm going to have myself a glass of wine with the wife, and we're going to check it out this weekend. I'm going to make it a note to make that happen. You know who
But
else? Oh, go ahead, Nick.
no, I was going to say everything that I also said about Game of Thrones being like a social lubricant is true because, that's like people are talking about it at the water cooler. A couple people have sent me messages like, who do you think's going to die? Or, do you think Arya is going to, you're not going to know what any of this means, but do you think Arya is going to steal the face of a White Walker? Or do you think like Daenerys is going to become the Night Queen and go on the join the forces of the dead and this and that? And so yeah, people are talking. It's a good thing.
Huh. Do you have any predictions? Like, do you have an idea of where it's headed?
Gosh, I mean the whole thing with Game of Thrones is that just when you think you have an idea where it's headed, it completely throws you off. And so some of the ideas that won't make any sense to you, I just said. One is that this girl Arya she's able to steal people's faces and pretend she's other people. So one of the thoughts are, well, I know, right?
Thought it was
One of
you,
the
babe.
thing-
Damn it! You can't hold that against me.
Right, exactly. So maybe
Damn,
she's gonna
Arya.
pretend. Maybe she's gonna pretend to be dead, so she can like kill all the dead folks while pretending to be one of them. Maybe the queen, who we think is like the good, benevolent queen, is so power hungry that she's gonna turn to the dark side because she thinks she has a better chance of ruling if she's evil. Um, what's another idea? The dead are coming to attack this fortress, this stronghold, and all the women and children are hiding in the crypts. But the dead have the ability to resurrect the dead. That's how they like increase their
they
troops.
do.
That's how they increase their troops. They like add more dead people. And so one of the ideas is that they could all the people that are hiding in the crypts, they could turn all the dead people in the crypts into like, their minions and kill everybody that's hiding down there. So anyway, it's going to be action packed. It's going to be 80 minutes. I'm excited. It's one of the only shows I watch. So I'm pretty committed to it. And yeah, characters that we've known for many years are going to go bye-bye this weekend.
All right, we're going to try to sneak it in, the wife and I, either before American Idol or right after American Idol, which, by the way, this year is absolutely excellent.
I haven't watched it a couple of years. I used to watch, like, I'm talking 10 years ago when I was in college and it was still Paula and Simon, etc. I was addicted. I loved the drama and loved watching somebody win, but we'd just fallen out of tune. So I'm glad it's good. I'm glad it's still around. It used to be a fun show to watch.
The talent this year is absolutely ridiculous. They're down to the top 8, and man, God, it's going to be tough. Any one of those 8 could win, and I'd be like, yeah, they deserve it. I mean, it's that good of a pool.
That's good.
Yeah, another show that's going to see a lot of dead characters. Avengers. They're predicting, possibly $1 billion weekend with a B. That's big. So I have 0 predictions. Those movies are always so well done. I did not spend $25,000 or $5,000 or even $100 on tickets to see it today. It opens today, but we will be checking it out on Sunday, the kids and the wife and I. So I am looking forward to that.
I'm like you in Game of Thrones. I am not on top of the whole superhero comic book film genre. Haven't seen many of them, probably any of them since the first Spider-Man. But it's absolutely going to be huge. Like you said, I saw tickets selling for those crazy prices. Theaters staying open 24 hours starting today until like Monday. Um, and just an interesting thing I read is that like the rest of the box office is so intimidated by this movie. Like they know it's going to make so much money that like other people aren't even releasing movies. Like I think the winner of the box office last week just made like $22 million dollars or some paltry little number because like there's no movies out there because everybody's just waiting for this juggernaut of a film to launch. So pretty crazy.
I don't blame them. I don't blame them. I talked a bit about my enthusiasm for spring and Little League Baseball and the Cubs and all the things we get to do now, that the sun's out and the weather is a little warmer. I know spring is an important time of the year for you, Nick. What do you got going on in general this weekend?
Oh, you wanna know what I'm doing? Well,
Yeah.
so it's planting time here in Eastern Washington, and I got a little pond down there, and I got a hayfield, but I'm taking part of the hayfield, and I'm planting a bunch of stuff for the ducks and the deer and stuff to eat. So last weekend I went down there and I broke the ground with my little tractor, and last night I started spreading some seeds, and now I'm gonna go as soon as we hang up. I'm gonna finish fertilizing and spreading seeds, and then I got to harrow the ground over top. It's a tough life being a farmer, so I'm spreading dirt around.
You're the only person I know that literally has 40 acres and a mule.
There you go.
You want to tell them about your mule?
It's not a real mule. It's like a four wheeler. It's that's the brand name.
It's pretty awesome. I got to ride in it, folks. It's pretty neat. Good stuff. Do we want to do stock of the week?
You already did. I had one. I can either do stock of the week or I can tell you about the laundry robot.
Oh, let's go laundry robot. I talked Mill Rock earlier. I told you why you should look at it. I told you EMX paid twice what it's trading for nearly. So yeah, go look at them and do some due diligence and see what you think. Tell me about this laundry robot.
One of the things I relish in is the really stupid things that people try to develop and that people put money into, and um, I view it as a symptom of where we are in the economic cycle and the fact that there's so much available capital so cheaply that things get done that probably don't need to be done and shouldn't be done. And we do them just because we can and because we have the ability to, but there's really no place for them in the market. A couple of years ago, the thing I was talking about was this juicer that somebody was trying to develop and sell for a couple $100, and the whole shtick was that it's the razor blade model. You had to buy the juicer, and then you had to keep buying the packages of juice to put in the juicer, right? You know this story, but
Yes,
it
I
turned out
do.
that you didn't even need the juicer because you could just buy the pouches of juice and squeeze them with your hand. So you didn't even need the multi-$100 juicer that this company had spent however many millions of dollars developing. Well, this week the stupid company that has gone under was developing a laundry folding robot. And so they had sucked up $20 million to develop this robot. And I have to read you this because this is how stupid it was. This is how it worked and the people that invested in it. Sorry, I got to read.
No, I'm listening.
Backed backed by companies like Panasonic and Daiwa House,
Ooh,
Laundroid, that's what it's called. That's cute.
laundroid. Oh,
Laundroid.
I like it already.
Laundroid has ambitious dreams to be the ultimate wardrobe organizer for the entire household. It had cameras and robotic arms to scan a load of laundry, used Wi-Fi to connect to a server that would analyze the clothing and use artificial intelligence to figure out the best way to fold it. A companion app was then supposed to be able to track every piece of clothing that went through Laundroid and categorize the clothes by household member. And surprise, surprise, there's not demand in the market for a $16,000 autonomous, Wi Fi connected, AI enabled laundry motherfucking robot. The company is bankrupt.
Uh, what exchange was it? A public company or a private one?
No, private. But still, why?
Insane. Absolutely insane. I love it. We end with a laugh and a look in the mirror, right? Us humans are interesting folks, some more than others. That was really interesting and funny, both at the same time.
Go put your laundry away. I know there's some sitting in a basket somewhere.
There's always a basket somewhere. There's always a basket somewhere. Well, it's been fun, Nick. Anything you want to add?
You know you're not really ever totally done your laundry until you're naked.
I could go so many ways with that. I'll save that for another episode. Episode 16 of Bizarro World, everybody. Have an awesome week. Be nice to each other. Love each other. Be naked every now and then, at least when you shower, and have a great time, folks. Thanks for listening.
See ya.